I would remind everyone that House Republicans are the only ones who've taken up concrete action to avoid default. Together, we're doing something good for the nation. We're avoiding a devastating default on the national debt, and we're enacting needed fiscal reforms to put us on a more sustainable spending path.
Frankly, we should not be here. We should have taken care of this months ago. But once again, Republicans are demonstrating that they cannot govern. Republicans have used this manufactured crisis to force policy changes that are so unpopular that they could not possibly get them through on regular order. And for some on the far right, and there's a lot of them over there, this bill isn't mean enough. Mr. Speaker, with less than a week from default, we have been rushed back to Washington because Republicans decided they wanted to waste months playing games with the debt limit. They said if Democrats and President Biden didn't give House Republicans everything they wanted, they were prepared to push the entire economy off a cliff, causing catastrophic, lasting, irreparable damage to America, even though the GOP voted 3 times to prevent default when Donald Trump was president, even though 97% of the debt was accumulated before President Biden took office, and over a quarter of the debt was accumulated under Donald Trump, even though Republicans had no problem adding trillions to the debt with their giveaways to big oil and to Wall Street CEOs and lavish tax cuts for the very rich. Now they choose to play Russian roulette with our economy. But at the end of the day, we should not be making trade-offs between which vulnerable population gets to eat. I have a hard time understanding why we are kicking up to 700,000 older adults off of SNAP. It is just cruel. Food and hunger should not be a partisan issue. It is a human issue. But Republicans don't care who they hurt. We have over 30 million people in this country who do not know where their next meal will come from. And the current SNAP benefit, on average, $6 per person per day. That's $2 per meal. The majority of people on SNAP who can work do work. And we also know that work requirements do not work. In February 2021, a report entitled "The Effects of Changing SNAP Work Requirements on Health and Employment Outcomes of Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents," exactly what we're talking about here today. It was reported that losing SNAP made people less healthy and had no significant change in employment status. Again, work requirements do not work. But by the way, if my Republican colleagues don't believe me, they could have held a hearing. They could have held a hearing in the Agriculture Committee or in the Nutrition Subcommittee. They didn't hold a single hearing on this issue, not one. They have no clue who this will adversely impact, and I don't even think they care. You would think that we want to go into this knowing exactly how this legislation would affect our constituents, but they didn't even have time for a hearing. And here's the kicker, Mr. Speaker, and you got to love them, but many of the people in this chamber who are trying to take food away from struggling Americans are the same people who had their PPP loans forgiven. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle received hundreds of thousands of dollars, some millions of dollars in taxpayer dollars that were used to forgive some of their loans. They had no problem with that. They just shrugged that off. But they say we cannot afford to help make sure that families can put food on the table. It is ridiculous. And I also have issues with the anti-environmental language in the deal. The bill slashes key NEPA protections, approves the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It doesn't include transmission reform. By weaponizing the debt ceiling, Republicans are establishing a precedent that will haunt us forever. That one party can use the full faith and credit of the United States as a hostage to pass their wildly unpopular ideas that they could not get done through the normal legislative process. It's a lousy, lousy, lousy way to govern. And let me conclude by saying that in this Republican-led Congress, it has become unfashionable to worry about the poor and the vulnerable, to believe in the principle that we should bring everyone along, that we must meet the needs of the many, not just of the few. Mr. Speaker, Our goal should be to elevate people, not demean them. And the policies being advocated and forced upon us by my Republican friends do not reflect my values. And it is sad that for them, solving problems and uplifting all people apparently is not their mission. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.